Hello, everyone. I am that Weems guy back here for yet another episode, and I'm excited because yet again this week we hit another all-time high for our 30-day rolling average for our podcast, and that's not taking into account the YouTube numbers. That is just strictly the podcast feed numbers, and it's continuing to grow. So thank you to the audience, and as always, we remind you to share the link with your smart friends, but don't share it with the dumb ones. Joining us today is Mr. Erik Lund. Erik, say hello and introduce yourself.
How y'all doing out there? My name's Erik Lund. Currently, I'm a federal agent with a small agency that shall remain nameless. I'm also done some competition shooting, and so I have a little bit of that background. So I'm looking forward to being on here and have the unique perspective of I can talk competently on the competitive side of topics and on the tactical side. So let's giddy up and see where this takes us.
All right, I've got to delve into that background a little bit. You see, you've done a little competition. Now, I know you're USPSA Grandmaster, correct?
Yes. Yeah, USPSA Grandmaster, multi-gun. I really don't worry about the classifications anymore. Back when I was doing IDPA years ago, I was a master class there too. So yeah, I've had some success on that side.
And you shot for SIG's team and FN's team, did you?
Yeah. So I shot professionally for almost a decade. I shot for Sig Sauer when they first introduced their rifles and they were expanding their line. So I shot for Sig Sauer for 2 years. And then after that, I joined FN, and I shot for, at the time it was FNH, but then they changed the name to FN America. But I was on FN's pro shooting team for about 6 or 7 years.
All right. And, you mentioned that you were a federal agent now, but you were a real cop at one time, right?
I was. Years ago, a long time ago in a galaxy far away, I was a Virginia State Trooper up in Fairfax County, and I did that for almost 9 years. So I have worn the uniform, and I miss it. I do. I don't know if I would survive in today's culture of cameras and everyone provoking you, because I think my style of law enforcement has probably become a little archaic, but yeah, I love that time, and I always have a little place in my heart for all the guys putting on a uniform.
So you can speak definitively for the quote tactical side of things as well as the competition side of things.
I would like to say I can speak competently. I don't know if I want to say definitively.
Okay.
But yes, I can. I feel like I have some expertise I could offer up.
Well, there is one thing that you can clear up for definitively right now, and we're going to call upon your USPSA Grandmaster credentials to definitively solve this for the internet. Are you ready?
I am.
Have you ever witnessed me perform a sub-second draw on demand?
I can attest and affirm that you have performed sub-second draws and hits. I know a lot of guys got sub-second draws, they don't hit anything. You got a sub-second draw and you got a good hit. So yes, I have seen it and I can confirm it, and I will stand beside you and sing your praises to anyone who doubts you.
So by the rules of the internet, I am eligible now to speak on the whole topic of the sub-second draw.
Absolutely. You have performed the task. You can competently speak about it.
By your honor as a USPSA Grandmaster?
Yes, I will bestow that upon you.
Yeah, folks, I met Erik in 2013, I think it was. We were both attending an ILFE Master Instructor workshop, and let's just say some shenanigans ensued in those 3 days, and we formed a pretty good friendship. And Erik's been a great friend since then. If you go back to one of the early episodes where I did my Mount Rushmore of my personal firearms instructors, Erik's on that list. And so Erik, with everyone here to hear me say it or witness me say it, thank you for everything that you've done for me over the years. I want to say that to you in person, not just, hey, go watch this video.
Well, it is a great honor. And I do not take that lightly. You have been working and perfecting your craft for many years. You have a lot of influences that are legends in the industry, and just to have my name spoken in that company is an honor, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. Folks, there's been a lot of times where we've met midweek at a range somewhere. Hey, let's work through this problem. Or what do you think about this? Or let's test this bit of gear. And that has had a lot to do with my skills development and philosophical development from an instructor standpoint and an end user standpoint.
And I'd like to add that you are one of my go-to people when it comes to use of force. So when it comes to topics or things, I know things pop up in the news, and you and I will call each other, or I'll call you. You know, being here in Georgia, you know, you're also my local expert. So when some of the laws change or things happen, you know, trying to keep my guys in line with state law, even though we're federal, you know, I really rely and think very highly of your ability to break down use of force incidents, and you know, and just have intelligent discussions about that topic. And so you were kind of one of my first go-to guys. So I thank you for being there for that.
Well, thank you. And I guess now that the Mutual Love Fest has been concluded, we can move on to the show topic.
Okay.
And today we're going to talk about instructor credibility. And to a certain extent, and I've been guilty of this myself early in my instructor career, a lot of people just parrot things they've been told without putting, you know, critical thinking, any rational thought behind it, and reasoning through it and determining whether or not what they're parroting has value or credit to it. And one of those that comes to mind immediately for me is the whole fine motor skill versus gross motor skill thing, as particularly when it comes to like a reload. We'll just speak in terms of pistol, you know, slide lock, emergency reload. There was this big thing out there for forever, and I still hear it going around, that you should not use the slide stop to release the slide on a slide lock reload, because that's a fine motor skill and you won't be able to do that under stress. You should grasp the slide and run it, and because that's a gross motor skill. And I sat there and thought, okay, all right. And then it dawned on me one day, well, how did the magazine get out of the pistol?
Mm-hmm.
You had to hit the mag release button, which is about the same size as the slide stop button.
Yeah, completely agree. It's you know, I to date myself in the industry, I've been an instructor since 1995, and I remember going through my initial instructor schools with having that topic come up. Gross motor skills, you're under stress, you can't do, it's, you know, physiologically impossible, you know, so do the way I'm telling you, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to physically under stress perform these other you know. And yeah, I'm with you. I threw the BS flag on that as soon as I heard it, because prior to even getting in law enforcement, I was still just starting my competition passion. And I know how geeked up I got running around, you know, those first couple of matches. And I managed to get the magazine out of the gun. I managed to perform reloads. I managed to do, you know, slide forward on, you know, lock back. And so right off the bat, I saw a disconnect between what I was being told in the tactical world and what I was experiencing in my own competitive world, where, yeah, the stresses aren't as much, but there's still a level of stress, and you still have to perform, you know, these techniques. So I completely agree with that.
You know, I can argue that, you know, using the overhand or the inboard method to run the slide does have a mechanical advantage, because it does give the slide a little slightly longer length of travel to strip that round off the top of the magazine. And it's also universal. It's going to work with any semi-automatic pistol that you pick up and use. But those are the reasons you should teach that, not this whole fine versus gross motor skill.
Right, absolutely. Any semi-automatic that has some version of a slide, right, whether it locks open or it doesn't, because there are a lot of pistols out there, you know, older with designs that aren't going to lock open. Virtually all of them, grabbing the slide, getting leverage on it, manipulating is a universal technique. And so that is a good foundation to have. I look at the overhand slide release and manipulation as my second level default. So primarily, I'm going to train for the slide stop or the slide lock or the slide release or whatever term you want to use it, right? Because it's faster and more efficient. And one of the things you don't have necessarily in a gunfight is a lot of time. So being able to perform tasks fast and efficiently is a good skill to have. So by training to use a slide stop or a slide release, I am trading some of the universal skill and I'm directing it more to a directed skill. So I'm going to be a little more efficient, but I'm going to lose some universal ability, right? But I can always default back to the universal ability. I can always grab the slide. It costs me a few more tenths, maybe a second to get that presentation back out. But when it comes to gunfighting, and to a lesser degree competition, you want to be as streamlined and as efficient as possible. And using a slide stop allows you to do that. And the fact that it's occurring every day in video now, we have so much more video than we did back in the 90s of actual gunfights where you can see officers reloading and you see them using slide stops. You know, you see them using sights. You know, you see them clearing malfunctions, all this stuff, you know, that on some level were deemed gross motor skills, you know, and they shouldn't work under stress, but here they are in real world practicality and they're working. So yeah, that's one of those things I find those are instructors that basically don't want to answer the questions. They don't have the background. You know, somebody says, well, why can't I use the slide stop? And they just default to the, well, it's gross motor skills and it's physiological. And I know more than you because I'm the instructor. So your question's invalid. You can't even do it. And we just move on, you know, and that's not the mark of an instructor.
Yeah.
That's a mark of a range officer parroting what he was told because he hasn't developed his craft.
Right. You know, another one that I heard early on was, you know, say that students out there and they're shooting actually very well and they're shooting tight groups on their target, and you would get somebody that would come down the line and they would look at it, oh, you're shooting to control, you need to speed up, and you know that way your group will open up and you'll spread the damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I didn't respond immediately because one, I was a little bit, you know, it's like a flashbang went off in my head, you know, flashbang of stupidity, like what? And then I thought to myself, you know, that's a piece of paper fastened to a backer that is staked to the ground. It's not going to move. If that's a real person that I'm shooting at, chances are that exact same spot's not going to be there a half second from now, a quarter of a second from now. Yeah, the target's going to be moving. We're not necessarily going to be stacking rounds in the exact same spot like we would on a stationary target. And I just thought that I don't understand the logic behind telling students that.
Well, I think this comes into a larger concept, and we've talked about it before, and I suspect we'll get to it later in the discussion, but it's a concept I call of trying to force the square peg in the round hole. The square peg being the square training range, you know, where we work and develop our gunfighting skills and our craft. And too many instructors want to take skills and things that they do on the square range and force it to fit into the circular 360-degree world. And they want to take a big hammer and force it in, and that's not how it works. We should be taking skills and tactics and techniques from the 360-degree real world and try to mimic them on the range. And I think where a lot of it goes sideways is, you know, obviously we have to try to be safe. We may have people of varying skill levels that as an instructor we're responsible for, but we have to find that balance between, I need to make my training as realistic as possible and as applicable as possible, but still doing it in a safe way that I'm not risking unnecessarily getting my students hurt. And that's one of those disconnects you see between the reality of the square range and the real world. Absolutely, you're spot on. No one is going to stand still and let you shoot them, and they're certainly not going to stand still and let you shoot them multiple times. And even just the natural flinch of the body and how it twists. I mean, everything's going to be moving. You're going to be, it's going to move. So the likelihood that you're going to get 2 or 3 rounds going through the exact same hole in a real gunfight, to even bring up the topic of, well, you need to spread it out because you're not doing any damage. It shows to me, a lack of connectivity between theory and practicality. In theory, yeah, that makes good sense. In practicality, it'll never happen.
Yeah, and I guess this will be a good time to kind of branch off into this one thing of the whole competition and skills versus tactics. If what we're working on is the actual skill of using the firearm, well, then that's what we need to focus on at that point, is the skill of using the firearm. That's a separate thing from necessarily the tactics of using a firearm, and then we can combine the two.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even when we're doing, quote, tactical training, we still have skills-based drills on the tactical side. But instantly, if you mention the word competition, then they don't want to put the competition technique under the skills, banner. They instantly want to put it into the reality banner and then crap on it, and that's not the case. I've been fortunate enough, to work with a lot of high-speed military guys, and they sought us out in the 3-gun community, myself and a bunch of other high-level, nationally ranked competitive 3-gun shooters. Well, why would they do that? Clearly, we're not using any kind of tactics whatsoever. We're playing a game. But what they recognized was the skills in manipulating the guns and putting rounds on target fast and efficiently. There's an old saying, speed kills. And they recognize that those skills and techniques that we were developing on the manipulation side had application in the real world side. You just had to put it in the right context. And so I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of guys that their way of solving a problem is calling in a JDAM or throwing grenades, but when it came to dropping the hammer on somebody, the skills and stuff that were developed on the competition side to be fast and efficient and effective, they wanted those skills and they sought us out to learn them. So there is a connection there. You just have to put it in the right context. And I think context between the competition and the combative side gets left out a lot. And I assume we're going to go into the topic that broke the internet.
Well, I'm sure we will at some point because we've already touched on it a little bit, but I want to stay on that vein we're just on right now of the context. Yeah, you can learn from the competitive side of things, the efficient way of manipulating the firearm, how to get hits at speed, etc. But that's all from that context. And sometimes you have to reverse engineer that. And what I want to talk to the competition side of the house is a little bit is that's an application, that's a skill, but you also have to factor in the real world mental processing of an event that is actually happening live and in full color in front of you. And that's not the same thing as cardboard targets staked in place or on a fixed pulley system that are moving or that are popping up.
Oh yeah, no. Now you're talking the difference between a one-way and a two-way range. You're
Right.
talking about, you have stimulus, the whole, Colonel Boyd's OODA loop, processing information, getting inside decision-making processes, and integrating that with your skills. Yeah, there's a little bit, and this is a topic for another discussion. Um, the things that I got from competition that made me uh, the shooter I am today, as far as my skill level. Now, you can judge me on whether I'm a good shooter or whether I'm a crappy shooter, but I know what competition did for me. And um, one of the biggest takeaways that I got, or things that I learned from competition, was processing information. When it came to manipulating the firearm, tracking the front sight, doing things, running, visualization techniques. In competition, we call them visual um, visualization techniques. When I came up, I learned it as on the policing side was play the what if game. You know, you pull into, like we were talking the other night, you know, or actually you were talking with one of your other interviewees, and you talked about, if you pulled into a service station and you saw, 10 guys milling around, and you're like, oh, I'm going right back out.
Mhm.
You know, that's a what if game. What if I pull into a station and I see a bunch of guys milling around? Well, I'm going to go somewhere different. What if you pull in, and so from the policing side, we were always taught to play the what if game to try to mentally prepare us for, something that surprises us, so the same side is just that visualization. How am I going to run this course? I want to take this target in this order. I want to do it. Yes. And it's predetermined, but you're programming a response, and you still kind of do it. You just have more variables to consider on the what if side than on the visualization side, you
Right.
know. But like I said, that's a topic for a different day. But yeah, absolutely. You can only The competitive skills need to be kept in context. They're good skills to have because that's what they are. They are skills based. They are not tactics based. They're generally not practical based. And you're responding to an unknown stimulus that may behave in a predictable or an unpredictable manner, and all that factors into the real world side that you're not going to get on the competitive side, and that changes the dynamics of what you're doing.
Yeah, and Paul Howell in his book several years ago made an excellent point of how Americans tend to think of, well, that person's been shot, they're out of the fight. And it goes back to the whole thing, when you're children and you're out playing war, if you got shot, you didn't go down, all the other children would jump you and beat you because no, you were shot and you're supposed to go down. But when you go overseas, those folks over there don't know those rules, and they would keep
Yes.
fighting after they got shot. Well, when we get into these whole scenarios, these what ifs, and all these conversations, there's this general thought, well, I got my shots off in this amount of time and I got all 8 hits or all down 0 hits, whichever one you want to use. That presumes that that's going to effectively stop the bad guy. And that's just not the case. And so we can argue, well, yes, I have a sub-second draw or I have a 125 draw and I can get A zone hits doing that out to, 10 yards and under this amount of time or whatever. Okay. The bad guy may not stop from that.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think as Americans, a lot of that conditioning comes from the movies.
Mhm.
You say what is good or bad. Every movie I see, bad guys take like one hit to go down. Good
Yeah.
guys, man, we can soak them up. And then
Yeah.
even when something bad, happens to a good guy, I still have a good 30 seconds to say my final goodbyes,
Yeah.
and motivate people to go on and live in my memory, and but yeah, and that first shot's awesome. It is. And it's awesome if you put it dead center of the A zone, right? It's going to be a little less awesome if the guy you just tagged is wearing body armor and you just hit him in the trauma plate and it did nothing other than feel like he got hit with a hammer, right? So that first shot having that, is that a good skill to have? Yeah, I want to have that skill, but that is one shot. You know, I'm a big proponent of, my philosophy on gunfighting is problem solving at speed, right? You have problems and you need to solve them in a fast and efficient manner. Now, the majority of your problems aren't shooting solutions. A lot of times they could be, tactical based. They can be geometry based. How do I clear this tight corner? How do I maneuver around here? How do I approach this? How am I going to walk up on this car? How am I going to breach this door? So I mean, there's always problems to solve, and not all of them are pulling a trigger, right? But the big thing with solving problems is you need to solve them before they solve you. And that first round dead center, man, that was good, but have I solved that problem? No, because he's still standing there and he still has a weapon, right? So I need to keep solving that problem and not admire my work.
I just had a flashback to a day we were on the range and about solving problems. Well, Eric, you can always just never go to the left and just always go around to the right of the barricade.
Oh, my favorite instructor. Yes. Yes. So he shall, and I've given him away. He is a he, and he shall remain nameless. But yes, I enjoy watching his videos because some of his stuff is definitely comic relief, and some of it was wow, real light bulb moments that when you're working on a barricade and as a right-handed shooter with a rifle, you're trying to go around the left side, which is awkward, right? So his solution was, well, just go around the other side of the barricade. So fortunately, he lives in a world where there's only right side walls, that there are no left walls, left doors, or anything like that. So we did have a good laugh about that. So
Yeah, and that's just one of the things that context and background.
Yeah.
And having the skills and knowledge, I can go out and I can set up problems that can be solved in my, okay, this is what I want to go teach. So I'm going to set up problems where what I teach solves all these problems.
Yes.
But that may not be preparing my students to solve what problems they may face.
No, and that is a good example of what we talked about, taking a square range mentality and trying to squeeze it into the round world, circle. Okay, so let's give them a little bit of credit and let's say, okay, is there situations where you could do that? Well, sure, I could be working around a vehicle, and I could be trying to work around the left side of the vehicle, which causes some technique problems for me because I'm a right-handed shooter. I either have to switch hands, I have to expose more, so I have some solutions, and it's easier for me as a right-handed shooter to go around the right side of the car. Well, if I have that option and I haven't already cranked a bunch of rounds from the one position, I don't want to go back to that position, I want to alternate that. Well, that's an option, man, that's great. But if I'm coming down a hallway and I've got a room on the right side, I can't go on the other side, unless unless the idea is, well, I'm going to run across the danger area really quick like a rabbit, and then I can come back and turn my back to the area that I haven't cleared yet, so I can clear this area from the right side. You know what I mean? So once again, the context, and I'll give them a little bit. There's certain context where, yeah, if you have the option, you can go around the other side of the barricade and make it easier on yourself. But I think, like you said, you're doing your students a disservice by not showing them how to make the tough shot, to how to use the tough technique, to how to switch shoulders, to, if you're not going to switch shoulders, how to negotiate, solve this problem without transitioning the weapon to your weak side or your offside. That's a skill. That's an instructor. That is what you have to be able to do. So it comes down to, kind of, what is your focus as an instructor? And I always tell them, My job is to make you individually a better shooter. My job isn't to make you shoot like me, and my job isn't to make you use my system. I'm going to expose you to my system because I do things for very specific reasons and why I think they're effective. But if my system or my technique doesn't work for you as an instructor, I always want to have 2 or 3 or 4 backups that I can show you different ways of doing things so you as an individual can maximize your performance. That is my ultimate goal, to make you a better shooter. And unfortunately, there's a lot of instructors out there that don't develop their craft. They don't have that deep background or that deep bench to go to a different technique if it doesn't work for somebody. And they're stuck in their system so much that this is my system, this way I'm going to do it. I don't care whose system it is. And we've had this conversation. I will steal from everyone out there and beg borrow. Now, the one thing I will do is I will absolutely give credit who I took it from. But if I can put that into my inventory and make myself and develop my craft as a better instructor, and a new technique or a new weapon system comes along or a new way of manipulating something that has merit and it's fast and efficient and it's legit, then I'm absolutely going to put it in my rotation. I'm going to show it to my students, and I'm absolutely going to give credit to who I took it from. And you just don't see a lot of instructors. Let me say, there's a lot of instructors that don't have that view. And that comes down to, you got to find guys that, kind of evaluating instructors. There's no grading system. There's no ranking, so these are some things that you should be considering when you're watching an instructor's videos or, at his website. These are things that you should be looking for. Is he more about making you a better shooter, or is he more teaching you about his system, so he can brand you and promote you in his system?
Right. And as far as attribution and giving credit for where his material came from, I think sometimes as people, they just don't know.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Either they're choosing not to, or they just don't know where something came from. And if they don't know where something came from, that's kind of a telltale sign as well.
Yeah, I can see that when it comes to very specific things, like a very highly developed technique. Now, obviously, there's things like, okay, well, who developed the original tactical reload? Well, I don't know. And since that time, we've developed 6 variations of it. Right. But if there's a specific variation that I saw the specific person, and he may not have developed it, right, but he's the person that I learned it from, so he's going to get the credit from me. I'm not going to go through him. He's where I got it. It's up to him to promote where he got it from.
Right.
I don't need to do that research. Right. But, kind of one of the, if I had my Mount Rushmore, one of the names absolutely would be the first one up there is Mike Seeklander for me. I've known Mike for years. We came up together. We worked together at the U.S. Shooting Academy. I did some adjunct instructing for him for several years. And I can't say enough good things about Mike and his skills and what he does as an instructor. And one of his phrases that he uses all the time when we talk about, because Mike is in that unique position, he was a police officer. He's one of the highest level competition shooters out there. He was a former Marine, so he's another one of those guys that can play on either side of that fence, on the competition side or on the serious social side. And Mike appreciates this same topic, and I don't necessarily want to speak for him, but I think I can, in that he sees the value of the competitive side. And he has a term that he calls the combative applications of competitive processes. And I use that term all the time. And when we get into these discussions about where I got techniques and why I do them and why you should try them, I always use that phrase, and I always give Mike credit for it, because that's where I learned it from. And I think it's absolutely applicable in what we're doing.
Right. I guess while we're on that vein, instructor bios. You mentioned something when we were setting up before we went live. If you're looking on an instructor's webpage and they're trying to play this cryptic game of I can't tell you where I've trained or all this kind of stuff. That may be a red flag.
Yeah, yeah. There's these guys either don't put them up there, or they put State Department, or they'll put OGA. It just there's no shame in putting your bio up there. People are paying for your expertise, right? They want to know what they're paying for is what they're getting. If you don't feel that you have that strong of a bio for what you're trying to do, then go out and train more. Be a better instructor, continue to develop your craft. One of the other things I would look for is how recently have they gone out and trained. You and I are big on this, developing your craft. So I liken it to martial arts, right? And everyone thinks that black belt is, once you get to your black belt, you've achieved it. You're there, you're in the black belt club. And all these guys will tell you is no, once you're a black belt, now you're ready to learn. And it's that mentality, it's a never-ending process. It's a lifestyle. There's always new equipment. There's always new skills out there. There's always new ways of doing things that people innovate. And you have to stay on that. It's like having a legal refresher for law enforcement. Every year we have to get our legal updates because the laws have changed. Well, as an instructor, every year new things are coming out, new technologies coming out. The proliferation now of using night vision and IR lasers and thermals and all the stuff that was in the past, because of their expense, stayed on the military side. Not only are now they starting to come into the law enforcement side, but they're becoming hugely popular on the civilian side. And if you don't have experience with this stuff as an instructor, you need to develop your craft. There's a whole new world of technology out there that you have to have a background in to train your people. That you come across somebody and all of a sudden they're using, even if it's just cheap Russian surplus night vision, the advantage that that's going to give them in a low light situation against your responding guys is tremendous. And they better understand the capabilities and limitations of those systems so that they know how to deal with them, how they know how to solve those problems. But that all comes back to just the instructor bios. If they won't disclose where they're at, or they won't let us see, hey, here's my credentials, I'd find another instructor.
Yeah, and to your example that you just gave, it doesn't have to necessarily be something as exotic as night vision. Appendix carry. I'm not a person who carries in the appendix carry method, but I got several appendix holsters and I worked them with a blue gun. So I would learn the techniques, and I spent some time with some appendix carry advocates. Okay, what do I need to be dealing with here? What do I need to know? What do I need to be watching for as far as problems go, from when I have students that come through that are in the classes carrying appendix? And when I had a student show up on a line that was in his 70s that was carrying an appendix and carrying with a red dot, I guess I got to learn both of these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time on learning how to run a red dot, because they're not going away, folks. It's not a fad.
No, not at all. And in fact, oh God, who was it? Aaron Cowan, I think, from Sage Dynamics. I had seen one of his videos or a discussion somewhere sometime about something. And the topic came up about red dots, and it was, are you still running red dot site classes? And his response was no, because everybody coming to class is running a red dot. We're going to get to that tipping point in the pendulum where you're going to have us as instructors may have to start offering iron sight only classes because everybody's running red dots now, and that's a good thing, right? The red dot sight on the pistol, that's a, a different discussion, of what I think of those. But as an instructor, developing my craft, I need to be versatile and I need to be well versed in how to run those systems. That's new technology I've got to keep up. So much so that now I've run red dots on pistol from the competition side. So I've had years of running open guns with red dot sights. So I'm already familiar with them, but I never really had one set up for serious social or tactical training. Well, I just remedied that a couple of weeks ago, and I just finally picked up, a pistol and mounted a red dot sight. I've been doing work with that on the tactical side, and kind of just refreshing those skills that I had learned, shooting competitively. But you make a good point in that it still just comes back to developing your craft as an instructor. Like, I'm not a left-handed rifle shooter, but as an instructor, I need to know all the left-handed techniques because I'm going to have lefties that come in the class, and I just can't tell them, well, switch to the right shoulder. So as an instructor, one of my own personal weaknesses, like tremendously weak, is I don't know the first thing about revolvers. Here's what I know. You hand me a revolver, it's going to take me 5 minutes to figure out how to get the magazine in, so that is a huge hole in my individual and my skill sets as an instructor. Now, fortunately, I don't run those type of classes, or if I do run a concealed carry tactics class, I have been fortunate that I really haven't had a revolver guy come in. And on the one or two occasions I did have a revolver, what we were working wasn't a high level revolver class where I could still show him the reloads and the concepts and, so there. But when it comes to, guys like to be in one of your revolver only classes or Tom Givens or something like that, that would be something that I would jump into the class. In fact, I've even been looking, kind of keep an eye to the used market. If I come across the right revolver, that I would pick it up simply to help start working on some of my revolver skills, because I have none. I'm totally, it reminds me of a joke that I always thought was funny. So you remember the old Superman movies?
Mm-hmm.
With the old black and white one, and dun, dun, dun. It always struck me as funny that, in the fedoras and their suits and stuff, and they all had their little 5-shot chiefs, and Superman would land and give up, and these guys would start shooting at him with the revolvers, and he'd just stand there, da, 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 and then they throw the gun at him and he'd duck.
Yeah.
What? I'm like, somebody on that technical consultant team there needs needs a revision, but yeah, that's what I'd have to do. You hand me a revolver, I'm throwing it at the dude, because I just don't have that skill set. But that comes back to, it's a lifestyle as an instructor. It's you just have to continually develop your craft, and I just see there's a lot of, I won't say a lot there. I've just seen guys in the younger generations, and even in your and my generation, that don't do that. They kind of feel like they've made it, they've gotten their black belt, and they teach what they know, and they stay in that box, and they never try to expand that box.
Well, what I think we see is a bunch of firearms instructors that have maybe a blue belt running around out claiming themselves to be firearms instructors. They're not even close, even approaching the black belt. But we were just talking about revolvers, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that far out of the norm. Traditional double action.
Mm-hmm.
We're in a striker fired world.
Yeah.
But there's a renaissance of Beretta products. Think because of Ernest Langdon, and all of his acolytes. But you've got, there's still a bunch of SIGs out there running around, 226s, 228s, 229s. And occasionally those things pop up. Well, if all you've ever experienced as an instructor is a striker fired system, okay, there are some different nuances and techniques that need to be in place with someone who's running a traditional double action pistol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, completely agree. It's and I came up under double actions. I came up on SIGs, and to this day, a SIG 226 always feels like I'm coming home. It never feels uncomfortable in my hand. So much so that I still have a couple. And I will, as much as, and even with as refined as some of the striker fire triggers have now gotten, most notably, the Walther series, the CZs, some of those striker fire triggers have gotten to be, I think about as close to a single action hammer fired system as you're practically going to get with a polymer striker system. I mean, they've gotten really, really good compared to, the early 2000s when all you had were just Glocks with 5.5 triggers, and everybody was running over baby carriages to get the different connectors, to drop from a 5-pound trigger to a 4-pound, or what they called a 3.5, which was, I'd like to see their trigger measuring gauge, because every 3.5-pound trigger pull was still 5 to me. But yeah, and I'll take a single action trigger, not just 19, but on a double single platform, whether it's a Beretta, whether it's a SIG, I'll take that single action trigger all day long. And if all I got to do is fight through one bad double action trigger, I can do that, right? Because I can still shoot single action hammer triggers arguably better than I can ever shoot striker guns, and it's just me individually. But yeah, but that still comes back to being able to do that. And a lot of this generation can't. They don't have any experience with a double action, single action system.
What did you do whenever you came off of an array of targets with that double action gun though?
Oh yeah, you always, for me, you always got to decock. Yeah, I got to decock it.
What do you got to do before you go back to the holster?
Oh God,
You got to decock it.
yeah, always.
And if that's not something you're just absolutely maniacal about habituating in, and you're not insisting that your students, every time they come off an array of targets, that they do that decock, you're reinforcing bad habits.
Absolutely, and that comes
life-threatening habits.
Yes, the kind of habits that will get you a limp permanently. And yeah, but I mean, but that comes to running your system. Glocks, got to have your finger off the trigger when you're reholstering. I mean, how many times have we seen guys trying to jam a Glock back in holster, speed reholstering, which has very, very limited applicability, and they get a finger caught in the way, even in a striker fire, and it goes off. So, but that's learning that system. Get your thumb on the back of the slide, extend the finger, reholster properly. It's the same. You can almost argue it's the same technique, where with Glocks, I teach the guys to run the thumb on the back of that slide, right? So that they aren't pushing out a battery or, some issue like that. Same thing with the SIGs, or the Berettas, take notice that it's just learning how to run the system. It's a 1911, instead of decocking, I got to engage the safety, so that's just part of, as an operator, learning your individual system, and but yeah, that's another complicated. That was one of the reasons for the the meteoric rise of the Glock to begin with, was that it wasn't two different trigger systems. There were no safeties you had to put on or forget to take off. There were no buttons to decock. It was stupidly simple. It was as safe as any gun out there. It had the same trigger, and all you had to do was turn it on and turn it off, and that was it. And but yeah, I'm still, I guess I'm that older generation, man. I will you put a SIG and a Glock on the table, I'll probably grab the SIG.
Yeah. Well, you did listen to me and finally solve the question of which Glock connector is the best one out there.
And
the CZ.
Yes. Yes, I do have to say, after shooting your P10C, I was suitably impressed that I had to go out and buy one. So yes, as part of setting up my my red dot system, I chose a CZ P10F. So I got the full size because I'm a big guy, so I like big guns, and so I went the full size. But I would be lying if I haven't said I've been a couple of P10Cs I saw in the used market that I was like, well, maybe I should. And but no, I've held off on those. But yeah, no, that's a fantastic system. Like I said, it's got a one of the nicest striker fire triggers. And I look forward to doing some real work with it and seeing what I can really do with it. And yeah, that comes from being exposed to you and getting out and trying somebody else's gun, keep an open mind, realizing that I needed to improve that aspect of my craft for my students, and making it happen.
All right. Now, instructors and their individual craft and skill sets. What do you think of an instructor who's afraid to stand up and demonstrate their craft and skill set in front of a bunch of students?
Now, here's how I'll relate that to you. I generally think dogs are a very good judge of character. And if a dog doesn't like you, then I probably don't like you. If you're an instructor that won't get up and demonstrate what you're teaching, it kind of falls into that mentality. Like, yeah, I'm suspicious of you right away. You know, your credibility has taken a hit to me, because from a craft and a professional point of view, a demonstration, a physical demonstration is just part of the learning process. You know, I'm going to tell you about a technique and why we want to do it, give you the foundations. I'm going to break the technique down into its components and show it to you. Well, part of that demonstration at live fire is putting everything together so they can see what could be a longer, complicated technique process. For example, think about clearing a double feed on a handgun. Of all the steps we have to go through, whatever your technique is, there's some version of, I've got to lock the slide, I've got to rip the magazine, I've got to clear the obstruction, I've got to reload the gun. So there are several steps in that technique that I can show you individually. And let's say there's 5 or 6 different points in the technique I'm showing you. And then to just turn around and say, okay, go on the line and go work it, and never see it from beginning to end, how it's supposed to flow and how it works. You know, I think you're doing a disservice to the learning process from the learning side of teaching somebody something they haven't done before. You know, now, having said that, the main criticism I've heard from primarily one well-known instructor is that he chooses, and I'm going to, you know, hopefully put some accurate words in his mouth. His position is basically that instructor demos are nothing more than a way for the instructor to show off to the students. And to a degree, I can agree with him, right? The purpose of a demonstration is not for me to show you how fast I can do it. It's to show you what the whole process should look like when I take all the segments and I put them together. And coming from my background, you know, where, you know, being a high level competition guy, speed was everything in my technique, you know, not just doing sub-second draws, trying to do sub-second reloads. You know, when you're doing things that fast, you're trying to perform at 100% of your ability. When I'm in the instructor world, my job is to take all these segments and put them together in one solid flowing technique so a student can see how it is. So for me, and what I tell even the other instructors that I'm mentoring or working with when I'm doing instructor development classes, is your 50% speed is still going to be faster than their 100% speed. So there's no need for you to do it super fast or to show off, because that's not the purpose of it. So when they say, if you don't have the right instructor, and instructor gets a little bit of ego and lets his own ego get in the way and wants to show how fast he can do it because he thinks doing it fast makes him look like a better instructor, then he's missing the big picture. And it comes back to, it's not about making them shoot like you, it's about making them a better shooter. And to make them a better shooter, you absolutely have to slow your demos down, even whatever it's the speed type technique, to allow them to understand and learn what you're trying to do. And if to me, if an instructor won't do a demo, then he's leaving out, you know, as human beings, we process so much information visually. And if you don't show me a technique and do a demo on it, I think you're leaving out 1/3 of the learning process between telling, showing, and demonstrating. And to me, that makes you a poor instructor. And, so if I know a guy and he's just like, no, he doesn't do demos, I'm gonna be like, find somebody else. That's my recommendation. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm just saying, yeah, I'd put my money somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily has to be the shooting or you're showing people, oh, look how good I can do this. I think the reason to do demos is to clear up misunderstandings. Because I've heard an instructor give a list, set of instructions, and then they go to do the demo. And what I was visualizing as they were giving the instructions was not what they did when they performed their demo. Oh, that's what they meant by that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten to the point where in my classes, I even demonstrate the initial unload and show clear check at the beginning of a class.
Yeah.
Because there were things that I just thought that they were understood and that they were universal. Well, folks, there's no universal terminology or technique. I would tell people to have the line, all right, without removing the pistol from the holster, reach back and take the magazine out of the pistol. There were people that couldn't do that. They had no idea of how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I get everybody up on, say I put them on the 7 and I go up on the 3 and folks, this is when I tell you to do this, this is what I want you to do. And I demonstrate reaching back, sticking my thumb down and hitting the magazine release button, popping the magazine out, taking it out, and then stowing that magazine. That's how I want you to accomplish this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that doesn't work for people with paddle mag releases. Okay.
Yeah,
you gotta make adjustments for that. And then I'll show all the other processes of that unload and show clear. And then I go back around behind the line and then I give the instructions to do it.
Yeah. And I think it comes down to, on some level, I think that it's a confidence issue for instructors in that maybe they feel like if they don't nail the demo 100% perfectly, that somehow it hurts their credibility or it makes them look like less of an instructor if they can't do it perfectly all the time.
Right.
And we have both been on the line with each other when we have messed up demos, and there's no shame in it because I'll just turn around and be like, and guys, that's why I keep practicing, because as good as you may think I am, I still miss or I still make mistakes. Right. So I am still working to be a better shooter, and it's a never-ending process.
And make that a teaching point.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Diagnose what you did wrong, or have the students diagnose what you did wrong, and then use that to teach from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I mean, maybe it's some of that, but yeah, if you're an instructor and you won't demo, nope.
All right. You used a phrase last night when we were talking that I want to work into the conversation here. And something to the effect of, yes, that is one window of application, but I'm looking at a skyscraper full of windows.
Yeah.
Would you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So this is going to lead into our sub-second draw that broke your internet. And and I've got to work this in, right? So I have to, since we're going to talk about competition stuff, do I need to put on my competition shirt here and put it, instead of switching hats, I need to switch shirts.
Right.
But no. And so I found it interesting in your previous discussions with other people, the idea of the sub-second reload and its value, and the battle between the competitive, environment, the competitive side guys and the tactical side guys. And one of the things that I would offer up in that discussion is context, because context is important. So is a sub-second draw a good skill to have? I think it is, right? Within a certain context, right? If I'm walking up on a car as a law enforcement officer and I ask for, hey, this is why I stopped you. I need to see your license registration. Oh yeah, officer, no problem. And he reaches down behind his console and he starts coming around with a pistol. Well, now we're already talking about, this isn't the way competition works, right? This is the two-way range. This is the real world. I have to react to that stimulus. I'm already behind him in the shooting curve because action is faster than reaction. He is inside my OODA loop, and I've got to do something to get ahead of him in that decision-making curve, right? At that exact moment, when that pistol's coming out and you recognize that this is a shoot situation, it's deadly force, and I need to, the green, the go signal has started. Would you rather have a 0.7 first shot, or would you rather have a 1.3 first shot? Because a half a second is a lifetime right there, right? So within that specific context, that's a good skill to have, right? But it has a very limited window of application. And I use these windows of application. For example, we're in a QT or a 7-Eleven and something happens. Well, you know what? I'm not starting a gunfight in a QT if I don't absolutely have to, right? Let them do their thing. But if they start rounding people up and they start moving us back into the freezer, and then ostensibly I've made a determination that the reason they're moving us in the freezer is because they're going to eliminate all the witnesses, and inside the freezer won't make noise, and then instantly now this becomes a shoot situation. I'm looking for that one fraction of a second where that guy's distracted, where I can start my concealed draw, whether it's appendix or however it is. Within that specific context, is a sub-second draw a good thing to have? Absolutely, right? But the context is, and where I said that is a good skill to have within a small window of application, but I live in a skyscraper full of windows. So there's a lot of other windows that I need to put time in training that may be more important than this window. Is it important? Within that context, dramatically important. But in the view of looking at a 30-story skyscraper with 500 windows, well, I better not put all of my training time into one window, or else, I'm going to find myself at a disadvantage. And that's kind of just where I come down the sub-second. It's a good skill to have, but keep it in the context of when you're going to use it.
I would argue in the traffic stop scenario that you outlined that you're perhaps better off attacking the pistol instead of trying to outdraw it.
Sure. Yeah. Now that we're getting into tactics and, attacking the pistol may be an option. But now we're getting into a different, right. We were talking purely skills. Here's the situation. Here's the skill. Whatever the combative application has become, it's become a shooting situation. For whatever reason, you discounted the attack the pistol, right? And so once again, that's another option. That's a different way of solving that problem. And remember what I said before, gunfights are problem solving at speed, right? And there's many ways to solve that problem. But now within the context of that sub-second skill, yes. So is it important to have? Yes, because speed kills, right? Yeah. But I'm not putting in 90% of my training time for that one window in a skyscraper of windows.
Right. The scenario that you outlined as far as like in the convenience store, and I'm going to give a big plug here for John Murphy of FPF Training, because the concept I'm fixing to kind of go to is one of the things he spends a lot of time on in his classes. Is you have windows of opportunity. You just hit on it there. You're being rounded up, move to the cooler. Well, we have a saying, never get taken to crime scene number 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Never get taken. Claude Warner, venerable firearms instructor, has a t-shirt that says when they go for the duct tape, it's time to make your move.
Yeah.
You're looking for, all right, I've made the decision that it's go time. Now it's when do I go? All right, I'm looking for that application. Well, you got to know your skill set and your skill set on demand. And like what John likes to say in his classes, if you have a 2-second skill, but a 1-second window, that 1-second window is not the time to deploy that 2-second skill. And I'm paraphrasing. But if you have a 1.5-second skill and you have a 2-second window open up, that's when you would deploy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very elegant way of putting that, you know. You have to have an appreciation, a realistic appreciation for what you can do on demand, and when's your moment. You know, you've made a determination that you need a moment because it's gotten to that point. So when is your moment?
Uh,
And then doing that decisively, and you know, and other factors come into solving that problem. Um, but yeah, I think that's a very eloquent way of putting that.
One last thing on slaying the parrot that we've been doing today.
Okay.
Um, yeah, one of the things that I hear get brought up by people that I refer to them as not being in the know is they'll talk about, oh, you won't have time to see your sights,
Hmm.
or you won't be able to do this, or you won't be able to do that in a gunfight. Well, I would argue that if you haven't trained to do it, you're not going to be able to do it under any circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the best time to learn a skill is not the time that you need it.
Right.
We want to train ahead of time. Um, but yeah, this idea of if I understand, you know, your position correctly, you were talking about being able to see the front sight in a fight. Um, you know, for me, it becomes, how I like to phrase it is, depending upon the situation. Like for me, and here's a, you know, another, I don't know if you know, a myth in the industry, or what it is. Um, some of those things that, you know, parroting, right? Um, you don't want to close one eye when you're shooting, because you're cutting down half of your tactical awareness and all this other stuff, you know. And it's funny you mentioned the word pirate or parrot, because, you know, uh, it's not like I'm going to close one eye and run around like a pirate, you know.
Yeah.
It's, I'm going to close my one eye. I'm going to focus on the sights. I'm going to engage the threat. And then instantly I'm going to open up the eye. And the magical thing about vision is it works instantly, right? There's no warm up. It's not like when you open up your eyes, you need 6 or 7 seconds for that processor to spin up, right? And it's just slowly fading in. You know, you close your eye, it's dark. You open your eye, you see everything you want to see. So the idea that somehow if you close one eye for the time it takes to focus on a front sight for a precision or a precise type shot, that somehow during that micro amount of time, you're going to get flanked, or something else is going to happen, that if you had had both eyes open, you would have seen it and been able to solve that problem. I just don't buy that. So for me, and it's just the way I was brought up and the way I was learned. And, you know, and also for me medically, I have my eyes are out of whack. So I have a very dominant right eye, but I have a weak eye. For a long time there, I was 20/15 in my right eye, but I was 20/30 in my left. But it never affected me because I'm closing an eye looking through a scope, or I'm closing an eye looking through a red dot, or I've closed my eye when I needed to make a precision shot with a pistol. It always worked for me. So to be able to do that, but now up close, high speed, you know, we're talking inside 5 yards, chances are both my eyes are open, right? Am I focusing with a hard focus on the front sight at 5 yards? Not necessarily. And what I'll tell you is, I may not necessarily be focusing on the front sight, but I'm aware of it is where it is in relation to the target and the other sights on the gun. So I guess it comes down to, when it comes to seeing the sights and using the sights, and later on processing the information that you're getting back from the sights of what's happening, I see what I need to see to get the hit I want to get, right? So if it's there are certainly times where at 5 yards, I may end up closing my eye to make a precise shot. You know, your typical hostage headshot, you know, the guy's, you know, right here and he's just peeking out. And for whatever reason, you know, we can craft the circumstances. I have to take that shot. Well, yeah, that's a precise shot, very close. I may have to take it, right? These bad guys, they don't want to get shot any more than we do. So they're ducking and sneaking and peeking. A 6-yard precision shot, maybe this guy is just sticking his head above the windshield of a car in a parking lot. And the only thing I have to shoot at his head. Now I'm only 5 yards away, but it's still technically a precision shot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I may end up closing my eye because that's what I need to see to get the hit I want to get. And so the level of how I focus on that front sight is going to range everything from super hard focus to I'm aware of where it's at, but it's good enough to get the hit I want, and everything in between. But I'm still using them in some level.
Right. If I've got it, say, I'm going to say full value, and by that I mean, you know, guy is squared up to me and I've got his whole upper body. I don't necessarily have to have that hard focus, as you say, on the front sight. If I get my pistol between him and me in my eye line, the alignment of the pistol tells me if I'm good to go or not. If I'm not seeing sides of the pistol, top of the slide or whatever, just in that fraction of a second that I'm getting into my eye line, all right, that was good enough to go to get that shot. But that same guy at 17 yards, okay, now I've got to drill down into you know, being on that front sight to make that shot, because I just can't do it with that same, you know, just getting the pistol in my eye line. And getting the pistol into your eye line and being able to use the gun, that's not unsighted fire, folks. That is sighted fire. It just may not be a hard focus on the front sight fire.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
And you know, I've tested the skills in force on force. Now, yeah, it's not a real gunfight, but they're not going to pass me and give me my certificate at the end of this class that my whole agency knows that I'm going to. Yeah, that's a bit of stress. You know, and that's getting out and testing your skills, and that's going from the square range into a 360 range environment where there are consequences for missing, other than I didn't win this stage.
Yeah, no, completely agree. You know, it's funny that leads into, you talk about the parroting. You know, another one I hear all the time is, you know, and it's one of the things that as instructors, we can sit down at the bar, have a couple of beers and discuss, right? Because I can see valid points to both. But the example would be, you're not supposed to look at your gun when you're doing an emergency reload. You're supposed to keep your eyes on the threat, right? Okay, well, that's a position. I disagree with it, right? And I disagree with it because, once again, it comes back to being fast and efficient. So what am I trading, right? I'm going to trade taking my eyes potentially off, you know, somebody who's a threat, right? And look at the bottom of the pistol in a magazine, and I'm going to shift my focus to here, even if my head's down, for half a second, just to make sure that I can guide it in. And then once it's starting to seed in, then the rest of that process, I'm going to get my head back up. So let's say I even bobble the reload, right? Let's say I fumble it and I'm at 1.5 seconds. Let's push it up to 2 seconds, right? Realistically, what am I giving up, right? I'm giving up 2 seconds of knowing where the bad guy is and what he's doing to make my reload faster, more efficient, because it does me no good if I keep my eyes on him and it takes me 6 seconds of doing this. I'm like, okay, well, I saw him the whole time, but I can't do anything about him, right? And I'm going to trade 1 or 2 seconds or a quick glance just to get it started to make this faster and more efficient so I can get back in that fight. The idea or the concept that somehow he's going to see me look down at the pistol and not have my eyes on him and be able to maneuver in a position to take advantage of that before I get the gun back loaded up, I just don't see it. Show it to me. Show me your evidence. Because I've role played and I've been in simunitions hundreds of times for multiple agencies. I've been bad guys for special forces and SOCOM guys, you know, and I've been on the good guy side. I have never seen a single time, even across a room, where I was able to take advantage of somebody that I knew was reloading, because I just couldn't get there in time. I couldn't take advantage of that information, even if I was looking for it and be like, you and I are in a room. I know you only have 5 rounds in that gun. And the second I count 5 rounds, I'm going to rush you because I know you're reloading. And it just doesn't happen that way. So the idea of, I want to keep my eyes on the threat. And this kind of, we talk about critically thinking about as instructors, what are we telling our people, right? What does this imply? And there's another part here to this example that no one ever discusses, which is the disconnect between, well, I should reload behind cover. Well, if I'm reloading behind cover, how can I see him? Right?
Right.
And if I can see him, sight is a two-way street.
I'm not behind
Right?
cover.
I'm not behind cover. And so being able to keep my eyes on him with an unloaded gun just means that I can watch him shoot me.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a success to solving that problem. So it's this idea of, well, you got to keep your eyes on the threat. Well, if my eyes are on him, his eyes are on me, and I have an empty gun and he's still shooting, I might want to get behind cover. So it was, it's just one of those disconnects that gets parroted, and I don't say all instructors, obviously, but I hear that in the training community, don't look at the gun, keep your eyes on the threat. Why? I'll trade a second to get a 1.5 second reload as opposed to 5 or 6 seconds fumbling trying to get a magazine and a gun, just so I can keep my head up so you can shoot it and I can see you shoot me. To me, like I said, but it's parroted. I'm sure you've heard it. It's parroted in the community, but has anyone really stopped and critically thought about, what are we telling our people? I mean, does this make sense? And once again, I think that was somebody's doctrine. Some instructor somewhere was like, oh, this tactically, in a discussion we're having makes sense. I'm going to take that square range skill and I'm going to pound it into the circular hole and make it work. And it just doesn't, and that's, so critically think about what you're doing as an instructor. Do these things really make sense? Break it down. If I can see him, he can see me, and I've got an empty gun. That's not a good position for me to be in.
Yeah, and that brought to mind one other thing on reloads. There was thankfully in my area, a very short-lived school of thought that was trying to be introduced, and I don't know if it's still alive out there somewhere, or I'm just running in a different circle now and I don't see it anymore. Individuals were teaching that during the reload, and for those of you that are listening to this on podcast, you can't see it, but you bring the gun up in front of your face with the turn so that you could watch the bad guy through your trigger guard,
through the trigger,
as you were conducting the reload. Okay, that is a pure square range.
That's a guy that wants to straddle the fence. That's a guy that can't pick a lane, right? Yeah. It's either look at the gun or don't look at the gun. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to do both. And what you end up doing is not really looking at the gun and not really looking at the guy.
And if the guy's moving, are you like trying to keep him camera framed in the trigger guard?
Yeah.
And that was one of those where, like, I was on the firing line, and like the first time they had us do it, like I tried it one time just to see it. I'm like, no. And no. And
because once again, if you have to, you're interrupting your vision, like your line of sight, right? I'm going to put a big blocky object in front of it, and then somehow, like a little telescope, I've got to, I am losing time trying to get you into my trigger guard before I do my reload.
Right.
Just do the damn reload and do what you got to do. It's that's somebody who can't pick a lane.
Right.
That's what that is. Yeah. And so the last one I'll finish with is I got to get it in, is when it comes to tactical reloads, and we've had this discussion many times. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a minute. So my family member has finally woken up.
Oh, yes.
So
the world debut.
Yes, here we go. All right, come here, buddy. So I have got a new family member. Yes, this is my 11-week-old Belgian Malinois. His name is Slash. And I named him Slash because I want to get a little carrying harness for him. And I'm going to get a ferret. I'm going to teach it to ride in the harness, and I'm going to name him Burn so I can yell for Slash and Burn.
There you go.
Yes, but he is quite rambunctious, and I'm actually grateful that he slept through this interview, because if not, he's going to eat everything, because that's what little velociraptors do.
Yep.
But that's my little boy. So say hi, Slash. You are now famous.
That's right.
Yeah, so it is
All 200 and something people that will listen to this week, and the other 100 that'll watch on YouTube will know who you are, dog. So it's
are you kidding? The dog's gonna be more famous than me.
that's right.
And yeah, so no, I it goes to the tactical reloads, and the one term that I have heard since 1995 has always been you do a tactical reload when there is a lull in the gunfight.
How
And
long
we
is that?
laugh about, yeah, we laugh about this, right? Well, let's critically think about this, right? What is a lull? And I do it. You've seen me do it. I ask the students, I'm like, what does a lull mean to you, right? And you run down the line of students and you'll get every response from it's a couple of seconds, it's 10 seconds, it's, when the shooting dies down, all this. And the point is that the problem with that is a lull is a time-based stimulus. There is some amount of time that you have to make a determination, hey, I have enough time if I'm so inclined. The topic of even performing a tactical reload is another discussion, but let's say we're a fan of it, we're going to perform one. Now it becomes there's some time-based stimulus under the guise of this nebulous word lull that's never defined, that, hey, now there's a lull, I should be doing attack reload, right? And the problem with that is who controls time? Not you. It's the other guy. And he's not going to tell you, hey, I'm giving you a 4-second lull. That lull could be half a second. It could be 30 seconds. The problem is it's time-based and you don't control time and you have no idea how long it's going to last. So the idea of I want to tell somebody to unload their gun or to perform some type of process to get the gun back up to a full magazine when I don't know how much time they have doesn't make sense to me. It's a time-based stimulus and I don't control the time. Well, is it plausible that I can get caught mid-reload and only have no magazines in the gun and one round? Yeah, with 2 mags in my hand trying to do some type of manipulation. That's probably not a good time, right? That wasn't a big enough lull, but they didn't tell you that, right? So as an instructor, I changed that to a stimulus-based response. And that stimulus it's a simple phrase, right? When you feel safe in your environment. What does that mean? Well, it means different things to different people. But when you feel safe to do one, do it. Am I behind cover? Yeah. Has it been 3 minutes and we fired a bunch of rounds into the house and nothing's coming back out? It might be, hey, I'm moving along the wall from one place to another to get a different advantage, and I'm going to do the tack reload while I'm moving. But I'm safe in that environment. You may be like, hey, when all the bodies are on the ground and we're counting how many dead guys there are, then that's when I'll do attack reload. That's fine. There is no wrong answer because when you feel safe, right? So when you feel safe in your environment, whatever that means to you, do attack reload. Now it's stimulus based. It's not time based, right? And that is, but once again, that's when was the first time you heard lull in a gunfight?
Oh, probably the first time I heard somebody teaching about reloads.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember mine was 95.
Yeah. I guess it would have been 99 for me when they were teaching all this in the academy.
Yeah. So you're thinking what, 95? So what's that? 27 years ago. And I don't know how long that term had been before I heard it. Right. And yet you still hear it today. Why are instructors pushing things like it? Because there's guys out there that don't critically think, they just parrot stuff. Mm-hmm. So I guess the moral of this whole episode is don't be a damn parrot. Yep. Develop your craft, be an instructor, critically think, words have meanings, and express what you want with appropriate words and concepts, do the demos to support them, and stop trying to do stuff in a square style range, right? Come at it with a mentality of this is what happens in the real world. How do I best mimic it here, right? Don't come up with stuff on the square range and hammer it into the round peg. And there you go. I did your wrap up for you.
There you go. Well, now that the wrap up is done, tell them about AllFire Dynamics.
Oh, wow, there's not much to tell. So my private combative training company is a company called AllFire Dynamics. The website's being redone. But you can
The
reach me.
website's been under construction since 2013.
Well, it has been because my website builder guy started some podcast. He doesn't have any time to work on my website now. So
I'm not your website builder, guys. So there must be somebody else.
No, so that's where it's at. You can reach me through there if you need to, or find me on Facebook or on Instagram. It's AllFire Dynamics, so you can search and do stuff there. But actually the last several, probably the last 4 or 5 years, I have primarily been doing long range precision. I'm in with another company called Outdoor Solutions. We basically teach long range precision shooting from the perspective of hunting, long range shooting with PRS and the National Rifle League has taken off tremendously. And now there's a huge interest in guys that don't want to stalk up close. They want to shoot antelope from 400, 500, 600 yards away, and so that has been kind of my focus for a while. I've been doing a lot of long range precision, but I still do all the other combative stuff, and I need to get back into it. But that's there. Right now, I just live vicarious through you and jump in on your classes every now and then as that unknown guy at the end of the range.
Well, that's the thing. If you sign up for one of my classes, you never know who the mystery guest instructor is liable to be.
That's right.
Because there's been quite a few big names who've been shown up or just tagged in like, hey, Chuck Hager, come over here and teach us block on this. Or,
yes.
Hey, by the way, folks, there's a Grandmaster down here that's going to show you how to do that. That adds to the fun and adds to the value of the classes.
Well, and if that's the price I got to pay to get to be a student for a little bit again and get on the line and work on my skills, I'll gladly pay that price.
There you go. For the folks that want to shoot antelope at 600 yards, I've got a clue for you. Kind of like whitetail, they show up along the side of the roads. I was driving through Wyoming year before last, and I've been through the Bighorn National Forest. I have been through all this, just pristine country, all this barren country, whatever. And I come around down this hill and into this little small town, and there is the biggest antelope buck I've ever seen standing right in somebody's front yard in town.
Mm.
I haven't seen another car for 45 minutes. And I come into this town and there's this massive antelope.
Oh yeah, it always works that way. You've been in some 30-degree mountainside, observation point for 4 days and see nothing. You go into town to get a hot cup of coffee, and there it is walking across the street.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that. But well, it's been fun. I felt like I really needed to, like I said, I put on a collar here. I needed to class up the presentations. I mean, when I heard that David Cagle had like 4 on here, and I'm like, right. What? He's like, isn't he still like a teenager? I mean, I gotta get on the board here. And, David, we've never met, but I have a lot of tremendous respect for your skills and your background and where you're at in life. So yes, I'm making fun of you, and we've never even met, but I know you vicariously through Lee. So yeah, when I saw you were on 4 times, I'm like, man, I got to get on the board. So thank you for having me.
Well, there you go. Now you just got to pass Gale House. Hold on a second. Let me get my cup.
I still don't, I've got mine. I still don't understand this. You're going to explain this in depth, but all I know is when his name gets mentioned, we have to drink. So
I have to take a drink, and then you'll catch up to Hearn here eventually. But
right, sounds good.
It's been fun. I did an episode with Rob Beckman on his show on how to start a podcast, ironically. And he's like, how do you do your content? I said, it's easy. It's just me having phone conversations with people and letting other people listen now.
Yes.
Because this is when Eric and I call each other, this is what it's like.
Yeah, pretty much.
When we meet up at a restaurant somewhere or we go to a range, this is what we do the whole time. And now you, the audience, is just getting invited to join in.
Well, I think as a future topic, maybe you can have a panel discussion, and we'll talk about the eventual acquittal of Mr. Rittenhouse and that process.
That one, there's no telling how that's likely to come out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but that'll still be an interesting dynamic to go through. You know,
It's funny how people make big pronouncements on the internet based on just a headline or a quick 20-second news story or one article, and they make all these pronouncements. And then when the trial happens, all this other stuff comes out and they're like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Well, yeah, maybe the people that were making the decisions at the time did know all of that stuff. And what I'm seeing now with the Rittenhouse trial is that people are saying, well, I didn't know all this stuff to begin with. This is much different than what I imagined. But they're focusing on this little bit of testimony, that little bit of testimony. Oh, well, the jury has to do this, the jury has to do that. Folks, there is no telling what a jury is likely to do. I have personally seen a jury acquit a person of burglary, but convict him of possessing the tools to commit the burglary that he was just acquitted of.
yes.
Okay. There's no telling what's going to happen when something goes into the jury.
No, and what makes that even more funny is it's not like you can go to Home Depot and go to the burglary section and get specific tools.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm going to go on a limb and say those tools were probably any tool that you or I would have in our garage, but somehow with no burglary, they're still considered burglary tools.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. A shooting in which I investigated, in which someone who many people in the training community would know who the person involved is. I'm not going to say his name here in this setting. It all came down to the jury of where the flashlight was pointed.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other side of this person in the trial, the guy was claiming that the deputy's lights were shining in his eyes and that he couldn't tell it was a deputy sheriff.
Right.
Now, all of the commentary online about this incident was about other things, but the jury focused in on what position was it, where was the deputy's flashlight shining? And, the video's out there. You can go watch the whole thing. The jury had the video freeze framed, paused at a specific moment in the video when they could look, oh no, the deputy's flashlight was shining on the floor. It wasn't shining in his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what that jury's decision came down to. And that had nothing to do with what anything else was, was mentioned in all the online discussion. And, it did prompt a lot of discussion back when it happened. So,
so you and I, we can go down this use of force rabbit hole. Like I saw one out of New Mexico where they were, it was an issue over qualified immunity. Because they officers had claimed qualified immunity and they denied it. And the whole article, the whole basis of the initial shooting was, and why it was excessive force was it was a, suicide by cop. But the defendant had a knife, right? But he didn't have it tip up. He had it reverse grip. So it was along the back and his hands were down by his side. So it was kind of hidden by his forearm. And, the jury said that, well, because the knife wasn't pointed at the officer, he was behind him, it was no threat to him and he didn't need to shoot him, even though he's walking up on the guy. Because apparently to be able to do this, but it's just, different topics, different things, juries are funny things, interesting use of force where guys like you and I geek out on things like that. And, maybe a little, once all this settles, a little panel interview might be in order. You might need to expand it, and be the moderator of the panel.
I'm thinking of the incident. I think it was a University of Cincinnati police officer that ended up shooting a guy on a traffic stop, got drugged down the road by the car. Apparently like he reached in, tried to grab the guy.
Right.
And when I first watched the video, I'm like, oh, he didn't get drugged. And then you showed me the video when you slowed it down. It's like, look, see the spot on the road? Like you were watching the video and down the road, you could see a mark in the roadway.
Mm.
And then later on in the video, after the shooting is taking place, the officer is like next to that mark. Well, how did he get there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he did get drugged by the car.
Mm.
And it didn't show, you couldn't really tell it in the actual watching of the video, but when you go back and start looking at the the landscape around the incident. Well, he got moved somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah. All good stuff, man. Yeah.
all these nuances.
Yeah. Like I said, yeah, I got 3 more episodes before I'm even close to Kegel. So I got to come up with some more content material for the next time.
Yeah, we got to get you tied up here.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. Well, Eric, thanks for playing along today. And audience, I hope that you've enjoyed it. Again, share the links to the show with your intelligent friends. Don't share it with the dumb ones. And let's, if you want to keep these episodes going, let's keep it going. Let's keep it growing. And as always, thank you for your time.